Welcome to Datograms. I'm Jason M. Garrett, and while I created Datograms to teach my kids, every once in a while, they turn around and teach me something instead. And that's exactly what happened here. This one came from my oldest, and it totally surprised me. She said, "Dad, did you know that in Florida, if you hit a cat or a dog with your car, you can't just leave. You have to stop and call 911. Now, folks, I've been driving for almost 40 years, and I've never heard anything like that. So I did what any skeptical parent would do. I opened a browser, started reading, and went down the rabbit hole. Now, I'm not here to give you legal advice, and I'm not here to freestyle Florida statutes. I'm giving you the plain English version of what I learned. And of course, talking to you about what I think about all of it. So let's start out with the obvious. If you're involved in a car crash that causes damage to a vehicle or other property, Florida requires that you stop and remain long enough to identify yourself and comply with the law. If you don't, leaving the scene of the crash involving property damage becomes a criminal offense. In other words, it can be treated like a hit and run. Now, most people think of a hit and run as something between two cars or a person in a crosswalk, but the same rules apply if you hit a fence or a mailbox or, yes, somebody's cat or dog, because pets are generally treated as property under the law, and the crash involving a pet can fall under those same crash reporting requirements. If you hit a pet and drive off, in the eyes of the statute, you may be leaving the scene after damaging someone else's property, and that can carry legal consequences you really don't want to deal with. Now, I suspect some of you probably are bristling at the idea of treating a cat or dog as property, because most of us think of them like family. But for me, I don't care if the law considers them property or a pet. I'm just glad that there is such a law that creates clear duty to stop and deal with what just happened instead of pretending it didn't and driving on, which a lot of people do. Keep in mind, this isn't about trying to trap drivers who made an honest mistake. The law knows you didn't mean to hit an animal on the road. I mean, these days hardly anyone just wakes up, checks their calendar, and sees hit a dog penciled in between breakfast and work, right? These things aren't planned. The law really cares about what you do after you hit a pet. That is why it's worth talking about, not because you need a lecture on traffic code, but because it puts a spotlight on the exact moment where responsibility either shows up or it doesn't. Hitting an animal happens fast. It happens when you're tired or distracted or coming around a curve at dusk, or an animal bolts out of the ditch like it's trying to set a world speed record. And when it happens, when you hear that thunk under your tires, your brain and your body react in a very human way. Your stomach drops, your heart starts to pound, you feel sick with guilt and dread. And then it's at that moment that you have the thought that matters. Do you stop or do you just keep going? And truthfully, lots of people just drive away. Not because they're laughing and having a good time about what they just did, but because they're scared. They're scared of the confrontation, of being blamed, and most of all, they are scared about what they're going to see when they go back, confirming that the animal is injured, then having to deal with an animal in pain or dying, because that part hurts your heart, and it doesn't go away quickly. It can stick with you sometimes for a lifetime. So people do what scared people do all the time. They keep driving, trying to convince themselves that the animal probably just got bruised but will otherwise be okay. They move on, disappear, and try to forget. And that is exactly why laws like this exist. Not to run your life over an accident, but to force the right next step when the emotions are telling you to run. Make sense? In a moment, I'll tell you exactly what to do if you ever hit a pet. But first, I want you to understand why this even matters. This isn't about some freak once-in-a-lifetime event. Cars hit animals all the time, and a lot of those crashes never get reported, so nobody even knows the true numbers. But it happens enough that lawmakers didn't just dream this up one afternoon. They put rules in place because this situation keeps coming up over and over and over again. And it isn't just Florida. Different states handle it in different ways, and some spell it out more clearly than others, especially when it comes to dogs and cats and livestock. I'm not telling you to memorize statutes, and I'm not asking you to become an amateur traffic lawyer. I'm telling you this so you understand one simple idea. If you hit a pet, doing nothing and driving away is not an acceptable option legally or morally. Which brings me to the bigger point here. Responsibility is about what you do after something goes wrong, whether it was your fault or not. And character, your character, is what makes you do the right thing when it's uncomfortable, when you're shaken up, and when you think nobody's watching and you could just disappear. So if this ever happens to you, if you ever hit a pet in the road, you do the responsible grown-up thing. You pull over as soon as it's safe, you make the call, and you get help on the way. If you can find the pet owner, you do that. If you can't, call whoever your area uses for this, whether that's law enforcement or animal services, and you don't turn one bad moment into a worse one by running from it. And if you're a pet owner, do your part on the front end too, because tags and microchips aren't about bureaucracy. They're about giving others a chance to do the right thing and help your pet get found or get help faster. Now, if you want the step-by-step method for avoiding ever hitting an animal in the road in the first place, go watch Dadogram 12, Stop Killing Animals While Driving. That's where I teach the practical process for reducing the odds of this ever happening in the first place, because prevention beats cleanup every time. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Jason M. Garrett, and this has been your Dadogram. If you've ever stopped to help an animal, give this video a thumbs up. I'd like to know. And leave a comment, as I respond to as many of them as I get. Until next time, stay safe and drive smart.